The rain came down in sheets, hammering the cracked sidewalks outside St. Mary's Hospital. Ambulances flashed red and white, their sirens cutting through the night like the city's heartbeat. Inside, the lobby buzzed with the quiet chaos of nurses, beeping monitors, and people waiting for news they both dreaded and prayed for. A little girl stood near the entrance, maybe 7 or 8, her pink raincoat dripping water onto the polished floor. She clutched a small stuffed rabbit that had seen better days, its fur matted and its left ear hanging by a thread. Her brown eyes, wide and wet, flicked toward the glass doors every few seconds. "Mommy will come soon, right?" she whispered to herself, tightening her grip on the toy. The security guard by the reception, a heavy-set man with a coffee-stained shirt and a tired look, sighed when he saw her glance his way again. "Sweetheart, where's your mom?" "She's outside," the girl said softly. "They won't let her in." "Who won't let her in?" The girl's eyes flicked nervously to the doors. "Those men." The guard frowned, stood up, and stepped closer to the glass. Outside, under the yellow glow of the streetlight, stood 3 men, rough, thick-necked, wearing leather jackets and hard faces. One had a shaved head and a cigarette glowing between his fingers. Another leaned on a black motorcycle, a skull painted across the gas tank. The third man was packing, phone pressed to his ear. And next to them, a woman in soaked jeans and a gray hoodie was being blocked every time she tried to walk past. Her voice, faint but desperate, cut through the storm. "Please, my daughter's inside. My mom's in surgery, let me in." The bald one sneered. "Hospital's full, lady, wait your turn." The guard's gut clenched. Those weren't hospital security. He didn't recognize them, and their attitude screamed trouble. Before he could react, the little girl's trembling voice rose behind him. "Those men won't let my mommy in." Heads turned. A few people looked up from the waiting chairs, curiosity mixing with unease. The guard muttered under his breath and pushed through the doors. The rain hit him like needles. "Hey," he shouted, "what's going on here?" The bald one turned lazily, eyes like cold steel. "None of your business, man." "She's trying to see her family inside," the guard said, stepping between them and the woman. "You can't stop her." The third man hung up his phone, smirking. "We were told to keep her out." "By who?" The man tilted his head. "By someone who pays better than you." The woman behind him trembled, lips pale. "Please, I don't want trouble, my mother, in surgery. I just need to sign the consent papers. They said they can't continue without me." The bald man flicked his cigarette into the puddle. "Guess she'll just have to wait." The guard clenched his jaw. He'd seen these types before, muscle for hire, local gang affiliates maybe. Not smart, but dangerous enough. He opened his mouth to argue when headlights sliced through the rain, a police cruiser pulling into the emergency lane. The thugs exchanged glances. The woman took the moment to rush forward, but the bald one grabbed her wrist hard. She yelped, stumbling backward. That's when the little girl screamed from inside the glass doors, a sound that froze everyone for a heartbeat. "Let him why, Mommy Gio." Her voice was raw, piercing, pure panic. Nurses looked up. The officer stepping out of the cruiser stiffened instantly. Within seconds, he was running toward them, hand hovering near his holster. "Hey, hands off the lady." The bald man cursed and released her. The woman staggered free, clutching her wrist. The officer took in the scene, the bikes, the aggression, and his stance shifted from professional to ready for trouble. "You three got business here?" he asked sharply. The packing one smirked. "Yeah, just family business." "Then you can take it somewhere else." The bald one spat into the gutter. "You don't get it, cop. We were told she doesn't go in that hospital." The officer's patience thinned. "You threatening someone outside a hospital, that's assault territory." The woman spoke quickly, voice shaking. "Please, officer, my mother, she's dying." The officer nodded, motioning her toward the doors. "Go, I'll handle them." She hesitated only a second before running to the glass. where her daughter pressed her hands to the window. The moment their palms met through the glass, the little girl burst into tears. But as the mother entered, one of the men muttered, "You'll regret that." The officer heard it. He turned hand on his taser now. "What did you say?" The bald one grinned. "You'll see." Inside, the woman, her name was Rachel, was led quickly toward the elevators. Her hair clung to her face, eyes wide and red. She spent all day trying to get to her mother, but everything had gone wrong: her phone stolen, car vandalized, and now those men. She didn't know who they were, only that she'd noticed them earlier in the parking lot when she'd arrived. They looked like bikers, but not the kind she'd seen on TV, more organized, more controlled. The nurse guiding her said softly, "Your mother's condition's critical. Doctor needed your signature for a blood transfusion authorization." Rachel nodded, heart pounding. Thank you so much." Downstairs, the cop was still talking to the men when the bald one's phone buzzed. He stepped back, muttered something, and after a short, heated exchange, he turned to the others. "We're done here, for now." They mounted their bikes, engines growling like thunder, and disappeared into the rain. The officer didn't like it. He watched until the red taillights vanished down the road, then went inside to file an incident note. The little girl was sitting with a nurse, still clutching her rabbit. He crouched beside her. "Your mommy's okay now," he said gently. "She's with your grandma." The girl sniffled. "Those men were mean." He smiled sadly. "They won't bother you again." He was wrong. Later that night, in a dimly lit warehouse on the edge of town, the same three men stood before a taller figure, a man with gray hair slicked back and a diamond ring glinting on his finger. His presence filled the room like smoke, calm, powerful, dangerous. "You failed," he said simply. "She got inside," the bald man admitted. "Cops showed up." The older man's lips curved slightly. "You let a cop stop you?" She screamed, drew attention. He sipped from a glass of whiskey. "You were told no noise. I don't like noise." The men shifted uneasily. The older man, Vincent Morty, known in the underworld as Vince the Broker, set his glass down. "Her mother's surgery needed to fail," he said quietly. "Now it won't. You know what happens if it does." They didn't answer. "She lives, and if she lives, the papers she signed years ago come to light. I lose millions." Vince smiled again. "But it was thin and cruel. Fix it." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, a bar called the Rusted Angel hummed with the low roar of bikes outside. The Hells Angels chapter there was small but tight, a family forged through blood and loyalty. Inside, leather jackets hung on chair backs, laughter echoed over rock music, and the smell of oil and beer filled the air. At a corner booth, two men played cards: Jake, Hammer, Lawson, and Reaper, their nicknames inked across their vests. Jake was in his late 30s, rugged, his eyes sharp but tired. Reaper, a massive man with a thick beard, leaned back, grinning. "You look like you've been chewing on bad news," Reaper said. Jake shrugged. "Been quiet lately, too quiet." "Quiet's good. Not when it means something brewing." Before Reaper could answer, the bar door swung open. The same officer from the hospital walked in, soaked and uneasy. The music dimmed. Every head turned. "Even in, boys," the cop said carefully. "Need a word." Jake exchanged a look with Reaper. "What about?" "Something went down at St. Mary. Couple rough types stopped a woman from getting to her dying mother. Didn't look like your crew, but they rode bikes." Jake's jaw tightened. "Describe them." "Bald one, skull ink on his neck. Another with a scar over his eyebrow. Third had a snake tattoo on his wrist." Reaper whistled. "That's not ours, that's the Ravens." Jake's expression darkened. The Ravens were a rival gang, small-time, vicious, and unpredictable. They'd been stirring up trouble for months, working as hired muscle for anyone with dirty money. The cop nodded. "Thought so. Anyway, figured you'd want to know. They're starting to mess around hospitals now." Jake rose slowly. Hospitals. Yeah, some woman, Rachel Turner, I think. Her kid was there, little girl, couldn't have been more than 7. Reaper looked at Jake's face and frowned. You okay, brother? Jake's eyes were distant. Rachel Turner. Yeah, why? Jake swallowed hard. I knew a Rachel Turner once. She saved my life 5 years ago. The cop blinked. You're saying? Jake grabbed his leather jacket. I'm saying those Ravens just made a big mistake. He headed for the door, rain pounding outside, Reaper following close behind. As their engines roared to life, the bar's neon sign flickered in the stormlight, the winged skull of the angels gleaming red against the night. Somewhere downtown, a little girl sat in a hospital chair, clutching her rabbit, whispering, "Please make mommy safe." And miles away, the Hell's Angels were already on their way. The night deepened, but the city didn't sleep. Rain still fell, washing the streets in streaks of silver and shadow. Neon lights from diners and motels flickered weakly, painting the puddles in red and blue. Somewhere in that restless sprawl, engines rumbled low, thunderous, determined. The Hell's Angels were rolling out. Jake Hammer Lawson led the pack, his Harley gliding like a predator through the rain. Beside him, Reaper's bike growled, its exhaust echoing off the brick walls. Behind them, 6 more riders, black vests with the red and white death's head insignia, followed in tight formation. They weren't out for chaos tonight. They were out for answers. By the time they reached the alley behind the Raven's den, the rival gang's hideout, the rain had thinned to a drizzle. The place stank of oil, cigarettes, and arrogance. 3 bikes sat parked out front, engines still warm. Reaper killed his lights. Looks like they're home. Jake's jaw flexed. Good. The Angels dismounted. No shouting. No threats. Just quiet, practiced efficiency, the kind of silence that meant trouble for whoever was inside. Reaper knocked once on the metal door, hard enough to make it echo through the building. A few seconds later, the door opened, and a skinny man with greasy hair blinked at the sight of them. His smirk faltered the second he saw the patches on their jackets. "Oh hell!" Jake's fist cut him off mid-word, smashing across his face. The man crumpled. The Angels stepped over him and entered. Inside, music blared from cheap speakers and the stench of stale beer hung thick. 3 men sat at a poker table, one bald, one scarred, one with a snake tattoo curling up his wrist. The same men who'd stopped Rachel outside the hospital. For a brief second they froze, disbelief flashing in their eyes. Then the bald one stood, knocking over his chair. "What the hell is this?" Jake stepped forward, rain still dripping from his leather jacket. His voice was calm, too calm. "You picked the wrong woman to mess with." The bald man squinted. "Who the hell are you?" Reaper's grin was all teeth. "The people you should have never pissed off." The man reached for a bat, leaning against the wall. He didn't get the chance. Jake's boot slammed into his chest, sending him flying backward into the poker table. Cards and bottles scattered. The other 2 lunged, but Reaper moved faster, one heavy punch and a headlock later. Both were gasping on the floor. Jake crouched beside the bald man, grabbed a handful of his soaked jacket, and hissed, "Who told you to block her from the hospital?" The man spat blood, glaring up. "You don't know who you're messing with." Jake tightened his grip. "Try me." "The broker," the man rasped finally. "Vincent Morty, he paid us to keep her out." Jake's eyes darkened. "Why?" "No idea. He said the old lady had to die." Reaper's grin vanished. "What?" "Something about papers. Inheritance. Said if she lives, he loses big." Jake's heart hammered. He'd seen that kind of corruption before, money over mercy. Where's he now? The bald man chuckled weakly. "You think I'd tell you?" Jake stood jaw tight. "You already did." He grabbed the man's phone off the table, pocketed it, and turned to his brothers. "Let's move." Reaper kicked over the table on their way out, glass shattering against the wall. As they stepped back into the night, Jake felt the old fire burn in his chest. He hadn't felt it in years, not since before Rachel. Back at St. Mary's Hospital, Rachel sat beside her mother's bed, watching the rise and fall of her chest beneath the white sheets. Machines beeped steadily, their rhythm fragile but alive. Her daughter Emma slept curled up in a chair, the stuffed rabbit clutched tightly. Rachel brushed her mother's gray hair gently. "Hang in there, Mom, please." The doctor had said she'd made it through surgery but wasn't out of danger. Rachel prayed silently, exhaustion finally catching up. She didn't notice the man watching from the parking lot below, Vincent Morty's enforcer, eyes cold behind the rain-specked windshield of a black SUV. He lifted his phone. "Boss, she's still in there." Vince's voice came through smooth and low. "Then it's time for Plan B." Across town, Jake and Reaper were sitting in the Angel's garage. The bald man's stolen phone plugged into Jake's laptop. Lines of code flickered as Jake scrolled through messages and call logs. "Anything?" Reaper asked, packing. "Yeah," Jake said, eyes narrowing. "Looks like they've been tailing Rachel for a week. Someone sent them her photo, hospital schedules, even the surgery time." Meaning? Meaning, Vince wanted to make sure she didn't sign those consent papers. Reaper swore, "We gonna call the cops." Jake shook his head. "They'll take too long, and this guy," he tapped the phone screen, "isn't playing small." Reaper leaned on the table. "You still haven't told me how you know this woman." Jake hesitated. 5 years ago, I got jumped outside a bar in Denver. 3 guys, knives, ready to leave me for dead. She was working at a diner nearby called 911, stayed with me until help came. I owed her my life." Reaper's tone softened. "And you never saw her again?" Jake's jaw clenched. "Didn't think I would until tonight." He stood, grabbing his jacket. "We're not letting this happen again." Reaper nodded. "Then let's ride." Meanwhile, inside the hospital, Rachel's eyes snapped open to the faint sound of a door creaking down the hall. She looked up, confused. Visiting hours were long over. She rose quietly, careful not to wake Emma, and stepped into the corridor. The lights flickered once, then steadied. A janitor pushed a mop bucket past, humming off-key. He smiled politely as he passed, but something about his face made her freeze. He didn't work here. She'd been in this hospital for hours. She knew every nurse, every face. This man wasn't one of them. He turned the corner, glancing back once, and that's when she saw it. The small snake tattoo on his wrist. Her breath caught. Before she could react, her mother's heart monitor began to beep rapidly behind her. Rachel spun around and ran back into the room just as her mother's chest began to seize. "Mom, nurse, somebody help." Alarms blared. Nurses rushed in, pushing her aside as they worked frantically. In the chaos, no one noticed the janitor slip quietly out a side door. Outside, rain began again, light, steady, almost peaceful. The Angels' bikes appeared at the edge of the hospital parking lot, their engines rumbling low. Jake cut his lights, scanning the area. Reaper, east exit. Ghost, cover the back lot. No one goes in or out without us knowing. They fanned out like shadows. Jake's gut told him they were already too late. Inside, Rachel stood frozen as doctors tried to stabilize her mother. Her hands shook, her heart pounding. The little girl woke up to the noise, frightened and crying. "Mommy." Rachel turned, tears streaming. "It's okay, baby, it's okay." But her voice broke. Minutes passed like hours. Then the long, flat tone filled the room. Rachel screamed. Nurses stepped in to pull her away, but she collapsed against the wall, sobbing. Jake arrived just in time to see her through the small window in the door, broken, trembling, the child in her arms. Reaper joined him, face grim. "What happened?" Jake's voice was hoarse. "They got to her." At the same moment, in a luxury penthouse downtown, Vincent Morty swirled his whiskey and smiled as he listened to the report over the phone. "It's done." The voice on the other end replied, "Yes, the old woman's gone." "Good," Vince said smoothly. "Tie up the rest of it. I don't want the daughter talking either." He hung up and walked to the window, gazing down at the wet city below. No loose ends. He didn't notice the black motorcycle parked 2 blocks away, or the man watching from behind the tinted visor. Jake revved the engine once, the growl echoing up the concrete walls. Then he whispered to himself, "You made it personal." Back at the hospital, Rachel sat alone in the quiet room, holding her mother's cold hand. Her daughter slept beside her again, too exhausted to cry. A knock sounded softly on the door. She turned, eyes swollen and red. Jake stood there. His hair was damp, his jacket still dripping, but his face was kind and haunted. "Rachel," he said quietly. Her breath caught. "Jake. It's been a long time." She stared at him, disbelief mingling with pain. "What are you doing here?" "Making sure you're safe." Her lips trembled. "You can't help me, it's too late." He shook his head slowly. "Not yet. The people who did this, they're not done, and neither am I." Tears welled in her eyes again. "Why would anyone want to hurt us?" Jake looked toward the hallway where the machine still beeped softly. "Because your mom knew something they wanted buried." He stepped closer. "But I'm not letting them touch you or your little girl." Rachel looked down at Emma, asleep with her rabbit. "They already took everything from us." Jake's jaw tightened. "Then we take it back." Outside, the storm began to rise again, thunder rolling in the distance. Across the city, the ravens regrouped, unaware of the storm about to hit them. And deep in his penthouse, Vincent Morty poured himself another drink, blissfully ignorant of the red and white tide closing in on his empire. Because when the angels rode for blood, there was no escape. The morning after the storm, the sky looked bruised, purple clouds dragging across the pale dawn. St. Mary's Hospital sat quiet now, its hallways scrubbed clean of last night's chaos. But inside, the grief still lingered. Rachel sat on a bench outside her mother's room, her hands clasped together, her face pale and empty. Her daughter, Emma, slept with her head on her lap, clutching that same stuffed rabbit like it was life itself. The world had shrunk to silence, broken only by the occasional squeak of nurses' shoes or the low hum of machines. Then heavy boots echoed down the corridor. Jake appeared, his black leather jacket glistening faintly under the hospital lights, Reaper trailing behind him. Both men looked like they didn't belong in a place of healing, more like storm clouds that had drifted in from another world. Rachel looked up, eyes rimmed red. "They took her from me." Jake nodded slowly, removing his gloves. "I know, but we're going to make it right." She stared at him, confusion warring with exhaustion. "How? You can't bring her back." "No," he said, "but I can make sure the people who did this never hurt anyone again." He handed her a folded paper, a copy of a message they'd pulled from the bald raven's phone. On it was Vincent Morty's name, a payment receipt, and one chilling note. "Ensure the Turner woman doesn't sign. If she does, end it." Rachel's breath caught. "Vincent Morty, the developer. My mother worked for him years ago." Jake's voice was low. "She knew something, didn't she?" Rachel nodded slowly, the memories coming back like shards of glass. "She was his accountant. She told me once she found proof he laundered millions through fake real estate projects. She was scared. Said if anything happened to her, the files were hidden." Reaper leaned forward. "Hidden where?" Rachel blinked. She said, "In the place where angels stand guard." I thought she was being poetic. Jake and Reaper exchanged a glance. "The angels," Reaper muttered. "That's us." Jake's eyes narrowed. "She left it with someone she trusted. Maybe an old member, maybe one of our brothers from the northern chapter." Rachel looked confused. "You think she trusted you?" Jake gave a faint smile. "Your mom helped me once, remember? Maybe she figured she could trust an angel too. He stood. Either way, Vince wanted those files gone, so that's what we find before he realizes we're coming. By noon, the Angels' clubhouse was a war room. Maps of the city were spread across the table, phones buzzing, radios crackling. Reaper stood by the window scanning reports. The Ravens are laying low. Half their bikes are gone. Vince probably sent them underground. Jake nodded, tracing a line on the map with his finger. Vince's main front is that construction yard by the docks. If he's burning evidence, it'll be there. Ghost, another angel with a jagged scar across his jaw, tossed a file down. Word is he's flying out tonight. Private jet, midnight. Jake's eyes hardened. Then we've got 12 hours. Reaper grinned. Plenty of time to ruin his day. That evening, Rachel sat with Emma in a safe room the Angels kept behind their clubhouse. A converted storage room now filled with blankets, warm food, and the quiet hum of an old heater. Emma looked up at Jake as he checked the locks. "Are you a bad guy?" she asked softly. Jake paused, surprised. "What makes you think that?" "Mommy said the Angels used to be scary." Jake crouched down, meeting her eyes. "Maybe we were, but sometimes the scary people are the ones who keep the worse ones away." She thought about that, then handed him her rabbit. "Then take him, he keeps me safe too." Jake smiled faintly, tucking the rabbit gently into his jacket pocket. "I'll bring him back when it's over, promise." Night fell again, sharp, cold, and humming with tension. The dock stretched out like a steel skeleton against the Black Sea. Cranes stood frozen, containers stacked high, floodlights cutting through the mist. The Angels rolled in silently, engines muted, tires crunching over gravel. They parked just beyond the fences. Jake signaled with a hand. "Ghost, take the north flank, Reaper with me." Inside the yard, men in black suits moved hurriedly between crates, carrying boxes toward a burning drum. Papers fluttered like dying moths. At the center of it all stood Vincent Morty, calm, composed, sipping from a silver flask as he watched the flames eat his secrets. Jake and Reaper crept closer, hiding behind a stack of containers. Reaper whispered, "You sure about this? We could call in the cops." Jake shook his head. "The cops let men like him walk every day, not tonight." They moved fast. Reaper threw the first punch. A guard dropped instantly. Jake took the next two down before they could draw their guns. Within seconds, the yard erupted in chaos, shouting, fists, gunfire. Angels poured in from both sides, leather and steel crashing into black suits. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, mingled with salt and smoke. Vince turned, fury flashing in his eyes. "What the?" Jake stepped from the shadows, helmet off, eyes cold. "You remember Rachel Turner?" Vince's sneer faltered. "You've made a mistake, biker." "No," Jake said, "you did." The fight that followed wasn't fair, not for Vince's men. The Angels moved like wolves, their years of brotherhood and brawls turning the night into a blur of vengeance. Reaper disarmed one man and slammed him against a crate. Ghost grabbed another and threw him into the fire drum. And Jake went straight for Vince. The older man tried to draw a gun, but Jake's hand clamped down on his wrist, twisting until the weapon clattered to the ground. "You killed her," Jake said through clenched teeth. "An old woman for money." "She was going to ruin me," Vince spat. "You think I'd lose everything for some old fool with a conscience?" Jake hit him hard once, twice, until blood dripped down Vince's lip. "You're done," Jake said. "Every file, every crime, we've got it all." Vince laughed through broken teeth. "You think that matters? People like me don't go to prison." Jake pulled something from his pocket, Emma's stuffed rabbit. He squeezed it once, and a faint click sounded inside. Vince froze. Jake smirked. Turns out the old lady hid a flash drive in her granddaughter's toy. Smart woman. He held it up, the small silver drive glinting under the floodlight. "Everything you tried to burn is right here." Vince lunged for it, and Jake's fist caught him across the jaw, sending him sprawling into the dirt. Sirens wailed in the distance. Reaper yelled, "Time to go." Jake stepped over Vince, voice low and final. "The angels were watching, Vince. You just didn't believe in them." He left the man there, bloodied and screaming, as the angels roared out into the night, sirens closing in behind them. Hours later, dawn broke again over the city. Rachel stood outside the hospital once more, this time holding her daughter's hand. She looked tired but lighter, like a weight had finally lifted. A detective had shown up that morning with the flash drive Jake left on her mother's old nightstand. The data inside had blown open Vincent Morty's empire: money laundering, extortion, bribery. He was in federal custody before sunrise. The world would know the truth. Her mother's name would be cleared. A single Harley rolled up the driveway, engine purring low. Jake dismounted, the morning light glinting off his chain. Rachel smiled faintly. "You really did it." He shrugged. "Couldn't have done it without your mom. She was the brave one." Emma ran up and hugged his leg. "You brought Mr. Bunny back." Jake laughed softly and pulled the rabbit from his jacket, a small smile tugging his scarred face. "Told you I would." Rachel's eyes softened. "You could stay, you know. Emma would like that." Jake looked at the hospital, the place that had started all this, then at the highway stretching beyond the trees. "I don't stay anywhere long," he said quietly, "but you ever need me." He handed her a small pin, a silver angel's wing etched with red. "Just send this, and we'll come." Rachel nodded, tears glimmering again, but this time they weren't from sorrow. "Thank you, Jake." He put on his helmet, the wind tugging at his jacket as he climbed onto the bike. Reaper's voice crackled over his radio. "You ready, brother?" Jake looked one last time at the little girl waving from the hospital steps. "Yeah," he said, "let's ride." Engines roared to life. The angels rode off into the sunrise, the city glowing gold behind them, leaving peace in their wake. And a story that would whisper through the streets for years to come. Because when the innocent cry for help, and justice hides behind fear, sometimes the only ones who answer are the ones with wings made of steel.